what modern Jews today will say is that, Christians, you can't believe in the Trinity because, one, the Old Testament, or I guess in their case, the Hebrew Bible doesn't teach it, and it contradicts Jewish monotheism. So we need to start there with what the heck is ancient Jewish monotheism. And I promise this is important. So when we think about monotheism today, we're thinking of God, God. And there's a certain set of attributes and terms we throw to it, like God is omni this, or he is all this. I know those are similar, but we kind of sometimes use different words because I don't always remember the different Latin, Greek, or Italian words that we have for them. So we kind of just oh yeah, he's all this, he's all benevolent, he's omnipresent, all those kind of different things. We just kind of throw those words around. And there's a certain set of attributes we throw on God, the God word, saying that this is what God is. And therefore anyone that does not fit this category clearly cannot be God in the theistic sense. That doesn't mean we've understood God fully, but we at least understand that if a being doesn't have one of those things, he can't be God, at least in the theistic essence. If you want to argue for maybe a polytheistic, you can try and get around that because you can bend the rules there. But even then that falls on its face a bit, and we're not doing polytheism tonight. We're just doing this. So God, we have a certain set of attributes and words. The thing is that while I'm going to show that our definition in ancient Jewish definitions don't contradict, that's not quite how it works necessarily with this precise wording, because when we use the word God, we use it in the Bible, we use it as a translation in the Hebrew for the word Elohim, of which that word and those attributes don't necessarily fit together as in order to be an Elohim, you must be all these categories. They're different set of categories, but you can still see how both definitions of monotheism really actually fit together pretty nicely. We have to understand what that difference is. So let's start here. Elohim can and frequently does refer to Yahweh, as we see in many passages, like in Genesis 1, where it doesn't say Yahweh, but it's referring to him. And you go to Genesis 2:4, where it says Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh God. You see this in Deuteronomy 7:25. You see it all over the place. There's a large number of places where Elohim is used of Yahweh. Sometimes it's used as a proper personal noun because it's a title, all right? I'm going to point that out right now. It's not a name, it's a title. It's kind of like when I call my mom, Mom. That's not her name. It's what she is. She is a mom, but I call her mom, and she responds to it like a name, and God does the same. But that doesn't mean that I can't also call them by their name, and therefore it's a contradiction. It's just okay, when we call God, we're referring to Yahweh. And so, but the other thing is that he is an Elohim. So let's look at the way Elohim works. Okay, so Elohim is used of Yahweh in these essences, like I just mentioned. Elohim is used in these instances, as I just mentioned. However, this is not the only being that's referred to as an Elohim. And there's many places I can go with this, but I'm just going to keep it kind of short and simple. If you go to 1 Samuel 28:13, you have Samuel, his dead body, so he's dead in the ground, and his spirit, his ruach, is being conjured up, and it says that there's an Elohim coming out of the ground in reference to Samuel. So Elohim then does not have, obviously if we're thinking okay, God, well, when you think about the word Elohim and the idea of God, they're not thinking of this way we think of God. Samuel's obviously not all-knowing. He's not all-benevolent. He's not omnipresent. He's not all-powerful. All these different words, he doesn't fit those categories, but he's still called an Elohim. So we have to hold on to that. Okay, so we have two different types of beings that are also Elohim. You go to Deuteronomy 32:17, which we're going to spend a little more time with later, where it's referencing to other beings that we would refer to as the other spiritual residents, as in they're not the best terms for it, but we'll use them for today just for common language. Angels and demons would be Elohim. They're in reference here. Or you go to Psalm 82:1, where it talks about how Elohim in the singular goes in the midst, plural, of other Elohim to judge them. There's a plurality of Elohim there. So in all three of these verses, you see that there are, and multiple other verses, there are multiple categories of Elohim. There's just Elohim all over. So, and they're being used for beings a part of just Yahweh. Now, it's always used for Yahweh, but it's also being used for beings that are not Yahweh. We have a divine plurality, if you will. And divine because the word El kind of plays into the translation of God or divine, depending on the context that you need to use it. So I'm talking about from a translation standpoint, what those words kind of entail. So there is a divine plurality of which focuses on there being multiple Elohim, but there's only one Yahweh. And this is the one scholar that I quote for this. Michael Heiser, the way he says the thing about Elohim is think of it as a place of residence term. So it's like a term referring to those of the spiritual realm. So you have those of the physical realm, you have those of the spiritual realm. When humans die, they're no longer in the physical realm, they're now in the spiritual realm. And when they're resurrected, their spirits and their bodies will be rejoined together, and therefore it is the spiritual and the physical together again. But they're still not Yahweh. So there's still a distinction there, okay? So, but here's the question. Doesn't the Bible deny there being other Elohim existing? People go to Deuteronomy 4:35. You were shown these things that you might know that the Lord is God. Beside him, there is no other. Now, I'm going to quickly point out that technically in the Hebrew, you were shown these things so that you might know that Yahweh is Ha Elohim, meaning he is the Elohim. Besides him, there is no other. So you might feel like a little tension there if you're trying to go like, well, hold on, this must mean that there is no other Elohim, but it's saying he is the Elohim, as if like there's like a higher importance here. If you go like a few verses later, people use this one as well, 4 verses later, Deuteronomy 4:39, no one take to heart today that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth below, there is no other. Same problem. Ha Elohim, technically, so the Elohim, the God. Yahweh is the God. Besides him, there is no other. Meaning that there seems to be this weird layer of he's greater, but if we're saying there's no other, then in what way is he greater than the others? Problem is, if you go back like a few verses, you see, and not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them, of which we've already specified earlier that if you go throughout the Torah, they're also called Elohim. And so those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. So we're talking about, don't worship these other beings because God is the greatest of them all. Besides him, there is no other one who is greatest. It's kind of where we're getting here for a bit. But Deuteronomy 32:17, I've also mentioned. This one's really cool. They sacrificed to Shadim, which we often translate as devil or demon. So they sacrificed to demons, Shadim, that were not Eloah. I'm frustrated with the ESV here because the ESV actually makes a contradiction with itself. I want you to see if I quote it in the ESV, you'll see the contradiction. They sacrificed to demons that were not gods, to gods they had never known. That's a contradiction right there. And also it doesn't fit the grammar. Eloah is singular. So they sacrificed to demons that were not God, singular, to Elohim, they, so plural, because Elohim is a word that is naturally plural. It's kind of like sheep. So if you, in the grammatical structure that you say, like, regarding a sheep, and it's all singular, there I'm talking about one sheep. But if everything else I'm saying refers to multiple sheep, then you know that the word sheep means two. Well, in this case, we have the Elohim is the plural, and the Eloah is the singular. So they were sacrificed to Shadim, so demons, plural, that were not God, to Elohim, plural, they had never known, to new gods, Kashadim, that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. So we have that there are other beings, and there are reference to demons. And Christians and Jews, well, at least most Jews, as I know of at least, would agree that there's a level of understanding that there's angels and demons. Now, maybe there's some people out there that disagree on this, but at least majority of Christians would agree on this, to my knowledge. And you still have Jews who agree on this. We have demons that be referred to as Elohim, and angels being referred to as Elohim. Deuteronomy 10:17, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is Eloheh of Elohim. Yahweh, your God, is God of gods. And Adonai, so Lord, of Adonim, lords. The great, the mighty, and the awesome, God. They use like all the different words for God here in this one statement, who is not partial and takes no bribe. So what we're getting is, if we were just saying that he is, he's God of gods, and there were no other Elohim, if you will, and then this verse doesn't really make a lot of sense to just say here. You might as well just say there are no other Elohim that exist, period. I mean, they have the words to say that, but they don't. They're saying that he is the Elohim of Elohims, meaning that he's the Eloheh of Elohims, meaning that there is no other Elohim who is like him. So we're starting to see more of what for them the idea of like ancient Jewish monotheism is, and then we can tie it together with, as we start to develop more understanding of who God is and what his ontology is, into the Greeks, and later on what the actual like full thing is going on here. But he's the greatest of all the Elohim. And remember, humans can become Elohim in the idea that they die and therefore lose access to their body. So they're just in the unseen realm. They're just spiritual beings. And then he's also Lord of Lords, of which humans and angels and demons can be referred to as lords and princes and stuff for the spiritual realm over nations of the world. And he's above all that too, which means that there is none in any realm who is like him. I think we're starting to see what this is. But hold on, just to throw one more thing in there. No other and no one, we saw that those sets of words come up a couple times, does not automatically mean none that exist. If you go to Isaiah 47:8, Babylon, Isaiah, says like, you Babylon, say to yourself, I am, and there's no one beside me. Well, obviously there is no other city. Obviously there are cities, and Babylon's not claiming that there isn't anyone that exists. So what we're getting here is that there is none other like me, is what it really is entailing here. This is kind of like the nuance behind the word. There are none other that are like me. There is none other who can compare to me. When we're getting these terms, we're starting to see that the monotheism for them is more of incomparability. Not that there are no other Elohim, but there is no Elohim comparable to him. And also the Shema, which Jews love to try to use to try to disprove this whole idea. First off, hear, O Israel, the Lord, our Elohim, Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh, your Elohim. Meaning that this is the God that is theirs. And if this is their God, that means that there are other gods that are not theirs, and that there are other nations who don't have Elohim, Yahweh. The implication here, as we see that they frequently do, is make implications like, if this is it, then everyone else doesn't have this, which means whatever they have is not this. There's nothing like this. Exodus 23, the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments, also says, you shall have no other Elohim before me. This verse wouldn't really need to exist if there weren't other Elohim. God could just say, other Elohim don't exist. To specify that there are no other spiritual beings that could, the idea that there are other spiritual beings that they could be deceived into worshiping instead. I mean, we see that frequently throughout Israel's history and even just human history in general, shows that God is saying, no, I'm the only one who's truly the God of gods. In that case, like, there is none other like me. And what we can see then is that by our definition of monotheism, this still fits into the category of Yahweh is the only one who is ontologically what he is. And there's none other who can be comparable to him due to his character, due to his power, due to everything that he has, everything that he is. None other can compare to him. No being can compare to him. So that's theirs. More specifically, is there's none comparable to him. And then you add on the further development of theology. There is none other who can compare to him because there is none other that are actually ontologically like him. Meaning that he is the only one in our understanding of God that exists, and there is no being in any realm that is comparable to him. He is Elohim of Elohim. He is Adonai of Adonim. Why is that important? Then Yahweh caused to rain upon Sodom, upon Gomorrah, brimstone and fire from Yahweh out of heaven. You have Yahweh causing something to rain from Yahweh out of the skies, which implies either one of two things. We have to check the context, but let's say there's either two ways to look at this until you check the full context. Either there are both Yahwehs up there, and one saying, hey, throw that down, or there's a Yahweh down here saying, yo, Yahweh up there, throw this down. Or you can say Yahweh's schizophrenic. Do you want to take the heresy, or do you want to take what the text says? We have two Yahwehs here. We also have in Amos 4:11, I overthrew some of you as when Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So someone's saying, there's a person here saying, kind of like when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, I overthrew you. And you were as a brand plucked out of the burning, yet you did not return to me, declares Yahweh. So we have a Yahweh saying, I overthrew you like God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. We have Yahweh speaking in the third person about someone else that just did what Yahweh did here. Not convinced yet. Genesis 22:11-12. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. From now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And remember, early in this chapter, it is Yahweh who is saying, Isaac is a burnt offering. And the angel saying, you fear him because you didn't because you were willing to give him up to me. Equating himself a little bit right here. What about Exodus 19:24? And Yahweh said to him, go down and come up, bring Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them. So Yahweh's saying, go down, get Aaron, come up, don't bring the rest with you, come up to Yahweh. So we just went to third person, lest he. So Yahweh's saying, don't bring the others to Yahweh because he will break out against them. but this is Yahweh speaking. So obviously we don't have a schizophrenic God here. Something is weird happening. And I think we can start to see what's really going on. But just to kind of show more, because there will be some who say, okay, well, maybe the angel is just, a representative. Problem is this. Well, if you go over to Genesis 31, 10 through 13, with Bethel, and it came to pass at the time that the flock conceived, that I lift up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the he-goats which leaped upon the flock were streaked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God said unto me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the he-goats which he leap upon the flocks are streaked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban has done to thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou didst anoint a pillar, where thou didst vow a vow unto me, which is referencing to Genesis 28. Well, hold on, before we go there, someone could say, well, hold on, if there are other Elohim, then it's just Elohim is saying that, I am the Elohim that you made this promise to. Problem. Genesis 28, Jacob has a vision of the heavenly ladder with Yahweh standing above it. So Yahweh's at the top of the ladder, saying, I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. Then the whole vision plays out, and Jacob states, surely Yahweh's in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of Elohim, meaning this is the house of Yahweh, and this is the gate of heaven. He then makes his pillow stone and calls the place Bethel, and this is where he proclaims to follow Yahweh, which is the very thing that the angel does here. He says that I am the God of this place. Bethel, Beth meaning house of, and then El, which would be here, Beth Elohim, and he pays up but Beth El, because that'd be another way to do a singular God. So I'm saying Bethel. This is Beth El, house of God, singular. And which God is it? Yahweh. This is the angel. Quick other thing. Anytime the God says a messenger almost everywhere else in the Bible, that's not him. They say, thus says the Lord. The angel didn't do that. He just comes in and starts talking like he is. Don't believe me? Check the prophets, and every other messenger shows up. But this is not the only place we see blurring lines. If we go to Exodus 3, we have Moses where he goes up, he's walking around, and he sees the mountain of God, and then he sees that there is a flame, and in the flame is the angel of Yahweh. And so there's this figure, embodied presence in the flame, in the midst of a bush, and the bush is not catching on fire. So he goes to check it out. So when he goes to check it out, it then says, when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush. So now the question is this. Is there one figure in the bush? Is there two? Because the text is treating like there's two figures. You have an angel of Yahweh and you have Yahweh. And if we keep reading, and then it says that, then he said, do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then Yahweh said, and the text keeps playing this whole thing where it's like, is it the angel talking? Is it Yahweh talking? Are they blurring? They're kind of like blurring the lines between the two. And it's almost like you could say they're essentially, or in essence, the same, but distinct in person. Interesting. Could say that. But we're not done with the angel, because later in Exodus, we get, behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Okay, so the whole reason that he has this authority is for refusal to pardon is, the fact that the name's in him. It must be like, he's bearing the name. Humans bear the name. So maybe the angel really is just a representative. Okay, maybe he really just is this. Just a representative angel. There's nothing else really happening here. So, but the thing is, it's not just saying that he bears the name. It's saying that the name is in him. So the question is, what does it mean to have the name in something? So we're now going to develop very briefly what's known as the name theology. So in Deuteronomy 12, we get, you shall not worship Yahweh your God in that way, but you shall seek the place that Yahweh your God will choose out of all your tribes to put his name and make his habitation there. So we're talking about the place where God is going to be and to dwell, but it's saying he's going to put his name there. The name is being put in association with presence. It doesn't make sense to just like, you're going to carve the name in something. That's not what he's saying there. Nor is he saying like, hey, you're just going to say my name there. Because it's saying that this will be his habitation, where he's going to reside. His name is linked to presence here. But maybe it's just in this instance. Maybe Josh is just going too far. So what about Psalm 21-7? May Yahweh answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. Well, they're not crying out Yahweh, Yahweh, as if that's going to do a magical, whoo, shield pops up and they're protected. Nor is it them just carving names out. There's something specific with the name. So may he send you help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt offerings. Selah, may he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. May we shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up our banners. May Yahweh fulfill all your petitions. Now I know that Yahweh saves his anointed. He will answer him for his holy heaven, from his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of Yahweh our God. Okay. Well, it still could just be we're trusting in the very name of what he is. That very beautiful simplicity of his name is so powerful itself. But what if I took the past verse and I applied it here? May Yahweh answer you in the day of trouble. May the presence of God protect you. And then we keep going. May we shout for joy over your salvation, and in the presence of our God set up our banners. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the presence of Yahweh our God. Because in God's presence, no one can stack up to him. We saw that if you go to our Chaos Water series, even the Chaos Waters is just called merely water in his presence. There is none compared to him. When you talk about the Chaos monsters motif, when it talks about God crushing them in the Psalms, what I love is there's, I think it's in 89, it says that he crushed the head of Rahav like a carcass, which means the head was as if it was already dead before he struck it. What we're getting is this powerful statement of that the name of Yahweh is linked to the presence in some capacity. Not done. I'll keep on cruising along here. You then have 2 Samuel 6:1-2. David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000, and David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called the name. Unfortunately, some translations just leave it as the name once. The problem is in Hebrew, it's in there twice. So better, as I put it there, which is called the name of Yahweh. The ark is called the name. What is the ark associated with? It's associated with his presence. There was the idea that when the ark wasn't in the tabernacle, that God wasn't there. Now, God has filled the tabernacle when the ark wasn't there before in the temple. He's filled places before, he's been on mountains before in all these places. So he's not limited by that. But the idea of his presence is gone. God is not there. They link that and they call the ark the name of Yahweh. Important to recognize that the name is tied to something regarding the presence of Yahweh. Isaiah 30, behold, the name of Yahweh comes from afar. So now we have the name is coming. Think about that. The name is the one with burning with his anger. The name is the one with his lips burning with this anger, and in thick rising smoke. The name lips are full of fury, and the name's tongue is like a devouring fire. The name is the one that's being personified and embodied. The name is the one with anger. The name is the one with a tongue. The name is the one with breath. The name is the one that's coming. Well, if the name is coming, that means the name is going to be present. So what do we do with this? Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression. For my name or my presence is in him. Effectively, he's saying, the angel is me. If I put that in there differently, he will not pardon your transgression, for he and I are one, and he will be with you in presence. Deuteronomy 4:36-37. Out of heaven, let you hear his voice, that he might discipline you. And on earth, he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers and chose their offspring after them, and brought you out of Egypt with his own presence. Well, that's similar to this. The name is in the angel, and I just showed you that it's tied to presence, and here it's tied to presence. But now we have the presence is the one that's taking credit for bringing them out. And we have many different passages where you see that it is the angel who brings them out, it is God's presence who brings them out, and it is God who brings them out. There is a deep link that seems to be between the angel and Yahweh. Between this Elohim, who we just said at the very, very beginning, that Ancient Jewish monotheism deals with incomparability, that there is no other Elohim comparable. And now we actually have an Elohim that is somehow comparable because he is also being called Yahweh. And the presence of Yahweh is also in him. So what does that entail? Well, Exodus 33:14. And he said, this is God speaking, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. In Judges 2:1-2. Now the angel of Yahweh went up from Gilgal and Bochim and said, I brought you up from Egypt. But everyone else claims that God did it, or Yahweh specifically. Yahweh did it, and that God's presence did it. And now the angel, who again, if this is just a messenger, every other messenger says, the Lord says this, or God tells him to say, the Lord says this. The angel just shows up and he says, I brought you up from Egypt, brought you from the land that I swore to give your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. The angel is claiming the ownership here. Everyone else says, thus says Yahweh. This one is saying, I am Yahweh. I am the same as him, but yet distinct from him. Interesting. This one's really fun. Genesis 48. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh. Crossing his hands from Manasseh, he was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. Both cases would be referring to Yahweh. Then it says, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, may he bless the boys. He, singular. The God, the angel. May he. But hold on. But Josh, my translation doesn't say that. Well, because some translations don't really do well with this. Let me pull up the Hebrew for you in case you're not believing me. Verse 16 is one we're referring to right here. Ham Malak, the angel. Hag Goel, the redeemed. Ti, me. Mik Kol Ra, from all evil. He may bless. Ye va re. He may bless. It is a singular verb, masculine, meaning the angel is not a separate person. A separate being. They are essentially the same, yet distinct. There's somehow a connection between the two where they are both Yahweh and yet distinct from each other. That they would speak of each other in the third person. And I keep showing that there's these blurring lines between the angel and Yahweh. But yet they also are distinct from each other. And yet the angel is also called Yahweh. What we can see so far is the angel is distinct from Yahweh, but is showing to be comparable to Yahweh. But I thought there was no other Elohim like Yahweh. Doesn't this contradict ancient Jewish monotheism? Well, clearly the text doesn't think so, and no Jew thought so. Until the end of the first century, this angel has the presence of Yahweh in him, the authority of blurring up the line of who delivered Israel from Egypt. The angel is Yahweh and yet isn't? That sounds very familiar to me. We're going to see pretty easily how so many Jews were able to move forward into what we now know as Christianity because of these things. Here's one that scared Caleb. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm just going to share a little bit. So now the angel of Yahweh comes, and he comes to, talk to Gideon. And so the angel of Yahweh appears and said to him, Yahweh is with you, O mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if Yahweh is with us, why then has all this happened to us? So this is the angel who's having this conversation with him. Did not Yahweh bring us up from Egypt? But now Yahweh has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. And then Yahweh turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? So now Yahweh's speaking. Keep going down. Another time Yahweh speaks, and Yahweh said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. Then he speaks and he tells the angel, hey, stay and I'll return. Please stay here. I'll return. I'm going to bring this favor to you. And the angel says, okay, I'll stay. But remember, we just had this blur where the angel is here. We know that he was having the conversation, but now Yahweh's having the conversation. But it didn't switch. I didn't say there was a second person, a second character there, but somehow there is. So Gideon goes up to his house, prepares all this stuff, and then the angel of Yahweh said to him, take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock, pour them over the broth of them. And he did so. And the angel of Yahweh reached out to the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cake. So that we have an embodied presence here. Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die. Why would he be afraid of dying? Well, because we thought that only if you saw the face of Yahweh, you would die. But Yahweh is comforting Gideon and telling him that you're not going to die for seeing the angel of Yahweh. Of which the text also blurs the lines of who's who. Because Yahweh's present and Yahweh's speaking, but also it identifies the angel as Yahweh. Let's get into another fun one that Philo kind of plays with more during the Second Temple. I'm not going to get too much into Philo. I'll reference him towards the end if there's time. But there is also playing with the word. Okay, so let's review. We have Jewish monotheism, which is nothing's comparable to Yahweh, except for somehow this angel, who is the embodied presence of God that walks on earth. Not an incarnation, but a manifestation, if you will. But that manifestation is often in a human form. So God in human form, who is identified as Yahweh and has the presence of Yahweh, and is claimed as doing the same things as Yahweh, but is distinct from Yahweh. Well, in Genesis 15:1, after these things, the word of Yahweh came to Abraham in a vision. Well, first off, here's the thing. Visions are seen, and Abraham is seeing the word of Yahweh. He's not getting a presentation, not getting like a little slideshow like you're getting right now. He's not seeing words on the screen. You have 1 Samuel 3:1. That's the famous story where Samuel is about to get his calling. It says that the word of God had not been present. In fact, it says right here, now the boy of Samuel was ministering to Yahweh in the presence of Eli, and the word of Yahweh was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. So the word is linked to be something that is seen. God has not been showing up in human form. God has not been showing up in this way for a time. Down to verse 7, we have this whole narrative where we understand as God calling out to Samuel saying, Samuel, Samuel, and Samuel wakes up. He goes to Eli. He's like, what's going on? Eli says, it wasn't me. Go back to bed. And this happens a couple times. And now, 33:7, now Samuel did not yet know Yahweh, and the word of Yahweh had not been revealed to him. So he's obviously confused. And Yahweh called Samuel again the third time, and he rose and went to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that Yahweh was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, speak, Lord, for your servant hears. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And Yahweh came and stood, calling as at other times. Remember, we've had the word has been linked with visions, a manifested presence, if you will. And on the third call, or I guess technically, the fourth now, Yahweh comes and stands near Samuel. It says, wake up. Remember, the author tied this to the word, of which came and stood, and God is in human form. 1:4-9, now the word of Yahweh came to me. The word is coming, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Lord God, behold, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth. But Yahweh said to me, so now the word is being linked with Yahweh. It's not just the word of Yahweh, like it's just like someone represents Yahweh. This is Yahweh. But Yahweh said to me, do not say, I am only a youth, for to all whom I send you, you shall go, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares Yahweh. Then Yahweh put his hand and touched my mouth, embodied human presence. And this is the word that is doing this. This is another indication that Yahweh has been coming in the appearance of man while also being distinct from the one that is appearing. He is and isn't. Like he is Yahweh and isn't Yahweh. This is a weird thing. I'm playing with that language specifically. If you understand that language, you understand what is being implied here and why it was so easy for first century Jews to see why there wasn't an issue with the things at hand. We have two Yahwehs while also being one being. The text blurs the two together as if they are the same, while also recognizing there is some level of distinction. Then we have my favorite, the Cloud Rider. Very famous, a very popular text, Daniel 7, of which, let's start here. The Cloud Rider motif itself stems from Ugarit with Baal, of which means that the one who rides the clouds controls rain and fertility. Effectively, it's a source of survival because he is the one who brings all these things. He brings the clouds that brings the rain so they can live and all that stuff. And he rides, and he's up in heavens. So this is a motif only used of divine figures. But the biblical authors take it and appropriate it and put it onto Yahweh, saying, no, Yahweh's the true one who's the source of life. He truly is the one. It makes sense for them to do this. They do this all over the place. That they would take these things and say, Yahweh's truly the God of gods, playing into Deuteronomy. And here's some examples. You have Deuteronomy 33, you have Psalm 68, you have Isaiah 19:1. You also have Psalm 104, every single instance in the Hebrew Bible where it talks about writing the heavens, coming with the clouds, all those things, it is always in reference to a divine figure. And in this case, is always referencing Yahweh. Until you get here. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow. This is Yahweh. This is God right here. He sits on his throne. There's fire. All these really cool things happening. Is matching similar language to Ezekiel 1. Is also similar to the Ugrat pantheon for Babylon. All these things like of Baal, El, and all these gods. It's as appropriate as language to say this is Yahweh. He's truly the one that sits on the throne, and his divine counsels around him, and all these things. And then it says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, or some will say on the clouds of heaven, or right in the clouds of heaven, depending on the text you're reading, there came one like a son of man, one who was human. And he came to the Ancient of Days. And then he's the one who's given this dominion, this kingdom that will last forever. And it will not be destroyed. But again, every instance we have is that Yahweh is the one who rides the clouds. But we already have Yahweh seated. We have another one who is doing this. But again, Yahweh's not comparable. So how is it that we have a human who is comparable to him? Well, that's where the Second Temple Jewish literature was trying to really kind of wrap around their minds around these things. They were trying to figure out what is happening. So they came up with a couple different theories. Philo's theory was about the word, and he has this whole philosophy behind it. I felt like that we could get into that. It's really kind of cool because I will reference one New Testament here. John plays with some of this a little bit, and also with Greek philosophy, and also with Hebrew texts, with all this thinking about the word in his first chapter. So it's a really cool thing to talk about. I just didn't give enough time in order for it to be, by 9:30. And I said it because Philo was not recognized as a heretic for his playing with the word and linking the word with Yahweh, as if there was these two figures that were both Yahweh and yet distinct. That's the reason I say that. So I'm not saying that like I would break my promise. I'm not quoting New Testament. I'm not referring to this. I'm just saying that Philo's work is obviously very much recognized within the Greco-Roman period of Jews during that first century because they're using that language in their own text. That's the only reason I mentioned it. But I want to talk about the more popular ones. So the two other popular opinions were exalted humans and other spiritual beings. We're going to see why they're not so great, though. First example is Adam. In 2 Enoch 30:11-12, is looking back on creation a little bit and is talking about the sixth day. And it says, and I placed him on earth, a second angel, honorable. And at this point, angel doesn't just mean messenger for them. They actually are starting to distinguish the idea of angels as the good spiritual beings and demons as the bad spiritual beings. That thought is kind of coming through the Second Temple, leading to the first century with a lot of the Greek writings. We have Adam being declared as a second angel, honorable, great, and glorious. And I, as we God, appointed him as a ruler to rule on earth and to have my wisdom. And there was none like him of earth, of all my existing creatures. There's none like him, apart from God, who is greater than him. And is looking back on the sixth day and saying that Adam's the chief angel, which is weird because the chief angel is also one that rebels against him. And we have no text that shows in the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, if you will, that the angel ever goes against Yahweh. Ever. But then the testament of Abraham plays in this too, and it says, and when the wonderful one who sat upon the golden throne saw a few entering through the narrow gate, many entering through the broad one straight away, that wonderful one tore his hairs of his head and side of his beard and threw himself on the ground from his throne. And he's weeping, he's crying. But then when the ones who are going through they're being successful and they're going to the way that is the way of God, he's celebrating. And, so Abraham goes, my Lord, chief captain, he's talking to the one who's with them. Who is the most marvelous man up there, adorned with such glory? And sometimes he weeps and laments, and sometimes he rejoices and exults. The incorporeal one says, this is the first created Adam who is in such glory, and he looks upon the world because all are born from him. So we have Adam again being exalted above. But again, this doesn't work because he's already one that's been rebelled. We have this one that there's one who's incomparable to him. If we know that this angel is being comparable to Yahweh, and Yahweh's been known and said throughout the Old Testament that he can't sin, that he doesn't lie, and all these things, and Adam doesn't fit the narrative. Doesn't fit. What about Jacob? Prayers of Joseph, fragment A, says, I, Jacob, who is speaking to you, am also Israel, an angel of God and ruling spirit. Abraham and Isaac were created before any work, but I, Jacob, who men all call Jacob, but whose men is Israel, am he who God called Israel, which means a man seeing God, because I am the firstborn of every living thing to whom God gives life. And when I was coming up from Syria and Mesopotamia, Uriel, the angel of God, came forth and said that I, Jacob, Israel, had descended to earth, and that I had tabernacled among men, that I had been called by the name of Jacob. He envied me and fought with me and wrestled with me, saying that his name and the name that is before every angel is to be above mine. I told him his name and what rank he held among the sons of God. Are you not Uriel, the eighth after me? And I, Israel, the archangel of the power of the Lord, and the chief captain among the sons of God. Am I not Israel, the first minister before the face of God? And I call upon my God by the extinguishable name. So now we have, maybe it's Jacob. Maybe he's one because, he's father of Israel. So maybe he's the angel. Problem, Jacob met the angel. We already saw that text. Okay, well, what about Enoch was another thought. Because again, they're trying to parse this out. They're trying to figure out what's going on. Who is this? They're kind of accepting the second power already, but now you have a human who is acting like he is a part of the second power. And it's not even just like a manifestation we saw before. This is a human who's doing it, not just an appearance of a human. This is a human. Well, first Enoch, again, they're saying maybe it's Enoch. And what we get here, it talks about how, and it came to pass after this, that my spirit was translated and ascended into the heavens, and I saw the holy sons of God. They were stepping on flames of fire, and he's describing all these really cool visions that he's seen. He says that he falls on his face before the Lord of spirits, and the angel Michael seized me by my right hand, lifted me up, and led me forth into all the secrets, and showed me all the secrets of righteousness. You keep skipping ahead, and we see that with them was the head of days. We're starting to get some languages matching that of Daniel 7. You can see that they're really trying to draw Daniel 7 said that Enoch is him. Enoch is it. And his head was white and pure as wool, and his raiment indescribable. And I fell on my face, and my whole body became relaxed, and my spirit was transfigured. And the head of days came with Michael and Gabriel, Raphael, and Phanuel, thousands of 10,000s of angels without number. When he came to me and greeted me with his voice, and said unto me, This is the Son of Man, who is born unto righteousness, and righteousness abides over him, and the righteous the head of days forsakes him not. So now they're saying, okay, maybe it was Enoch. In 2nd Enoch, we get the same thought. When I fell prone down to the Lord, and the Lord with his lips said to me, Have courage, Enoch, do not fear, arise and stand before my face into eternity. The ark of strategy, Michael lifted me up before the Lord's face, and the Lord said to his servant, tempting them, Let Enoch stand before my face into eternity. And the glorious one bowed down to the Lord and said, Let Enoch go according to thy word. And the Lord said to Michael, Go and take Enoch from out his earthly garments and anoint him with my sweet ointment, and put him into the garments of my glory. And Michael did thus, as the Lord told him. He anointed me, he dressed me. The appearance of that anointment is more than the great light, and his anointment is like the sweet dew, and it smelled mild, shining like the sun's ray. And I looked at myself and was like one of his glorious ones, exalted human being among the angels. But it's also God's glory. You also have the idea maybe it was Moses. In Ezekiel the tragedian, upon Mount Sinai's brow, I saw a mighty throne that reached to heaven's high vault, whereon there sat a man of noblest mind, wearing a royal crown, with whose left hand held a mighty scepter, and his right hand to me made a sign, and I stood forth before the throne. He, would be God, gave me then the scepter and the crown, and bade me sit upon the royal throne, from which himself removed. So like God gets up from his throne, gives him the scepter, says, Hey, why don't you try it out? Try it out. So now I'm saying maybe Moses was the exalted one. Problem is, none of these work. Okay, so, first off, Adam sinned against God. Moses also sinned against God. But also, Moses talked to the angel. Jacob talked to the angel. Enoch, we have a couple verses on, and is pure speculation, since he is mentioned very briefly about not dying. That's it. We don't get anything else about it. And we don't really hear much about Enoch after that, other than a few references about, like lineage and a few other things here and there. But not a ton on who he is. Not like all these other figures like Jacob, Adam, Moses, who have this whole narratives behind it. Enoch is like this little blip. I'm not casting Enoch off as not like this really cool thing to look at in the text, but it's speculation. And they couldn't even agree on that. Not only that, but these are separate beings, whereas the angel is being linked as if he is the same essence, Yahweh, but yet distinct in the person of who they are. What about special angels? You got like Michael in Testament of Dan. And now fear the Lord my God, and beware of Satan and his spirits. Draw near unto God, unto the angel that intercedeth for you, for he is a mediator between God and man. It's referring to Michael in the text, within the context. And for the peace of Israel. So they're saying, okay, maybe Michael is, because, we see him being talked about. He's given a name in the Old Testament. Maybe he is the one who is the angel of the Lord, because he is the one who intercedes. He plays into that. But we don't get much about Michael till later. And even then, he's not linked to these other texts, nor does he ever take credit for the other things that are happening, like the angel of the Lord does. And even again, they don't agree on this. I mean, this is a speculation still. You can just see this about the different texts that they have. But it's pulling from Daniel as referring to Michael as the prince that watches over Israel. Well, you also have Joseph and Asenath. And lo, hard by the morning star, the heaven was rent, and great ineffable light appeared. And when she saw it, Asenath fell upon her face upon the cinders straightway there, and came to her a man from heaven, referring to Michael, sent forth rays of light, and stood above her head. And as she lay in her face, the divine angel said to her, Asenath, stand up. Second time saying, Asenath, Asenath. And she said, Here I am, Lord. Tell me who thou art. He said, I am the chief captain of the Lord God, and commander of all hosts of the Most High. Stand up and stand upon thy feet. All I have to say is that there are several examples and more where they're trying to figure out who, specifically one, the Son of Man is in Daniel 7. And also trying to figure out who this, maybe the second power is. Because we are seeing here, and I think I've made it fairly clear, that there is a second being who is linked to Yahweh, but is also distinct from Yahweh in his person. But also Yahweh is talking about Yahweh in the third person. And saying that Yahweh is God. Like you have the passage in Exodus 19 saying, go down, bring Aaron, don't bring the others. If you bring the others up to Yahweh, he will do this. And this is Yahweh saying, if you bring them to Yahweh, he will do this. You also have Amos saying, yeah, just like when God, or like back when Yahweh did this to Sodom and Gomorrah, I did that to you. We have Yahweh speaking in the third person. You also have in Genesis 19, again, Yahweh calls from Yahweh. This is just to give you a glimpse of how all this was into the Jewish mind. They're trying to parse this out. Who was the Son of Man? Who was the second power? The issue is that all of these are speculative and run into many contradictions within the Hebrew Bible that don't fit, or they have so many stones that just can't be turned over because they don't work, or they have keys that don't fit in the hole. Like these just don't work. But then comes Jesus, who is described as the Word, which plays in and Caleb's in a whole episode regarding the Greek philosophy and the Greek language, how that kind of plays this out, at least a little bit. I'm sure he would love to do more one day. But with all that said, we already went over an entire section where there is the Word that is personified and is an embodied human presence. So even if you didn't have all those extra things, you still have biblical precedence of the Word being an embodied presence, a human embodied presence. It claims to be over the council in John 10, walks over the sea in Matthew 14, freed the people from Egypt, of which every text we looked at said it was the angel, or it was the presence, or it was God. And Jude said it was Jesus. You didn't have the Son of Man, of which Jesus claims to be the cloud rider. And that's when the Pharisees go, all the different titles are either given to or claimed by Jesus regarding who he is, taking all these different titles that we just went over, saying, I am him. This idea of the two powers was part of why it wasn't difficult for a Jew to become a Christian and a follower of Jesus, because it was already built into the theology. It was after Jesus that Jews rejected it, not before. You can see the work of Alan Siegel for proof of that within their text. Jesus is claiming to be that second power. And the Jews who converted had no problem because it didn't infringe on monotheism for them. Because for them, the angel is Yahweh. Therefore, he is comparable because they are the same being, but they're two different persons. Sounds a lot like the Trinity and what the New Testament teaches, because it is completely consistent with it. And I'm not doing any eisegesis. I showed you Hebrew, and I showed you highlights of where it shows two Yahwehs. If you learn the language, I'm not talking about the Hebrew language, just learn the language of the multiple persons, you can find the Spirit pretty easily too.